Hello, everybody. Welcome into The Cycle. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined as always by Mike Maher. We are talking some fantasy baseball. This is our last episode to come out before opening day. We will have sort of a preseason-ish episode next week. It's going to be talking about some of our biggest questions for the 2025 season. That is going to drop on opening day next week. But this is our last one that is fully in preseason, draft season time of year. This upcoming weekend is, of course, the biggest draft weekend of the year for a lot of people. That weekend before opening day, it's very jam-packed for me. I'll be watching a lot of college basketball, and the only times I will not be watching college basketball, I will be drafting my fantasy baseball teams this weekend. So it's going to be a fun time. You and I have a couple of drafts together coming up. We're going to have some fun this weekend. Any kind of, before we dive into the show today, Mayor, any kind of thoughts you have going into this last weekend, this last home stretch before draft season is over?
Well, the one main thought I have is, you just brought up how busy of a weekend it's going to be. I just, remembered while you were talking that I have to fly to New York to do 3 drafts in 2 days. So that'll be fun. Trying to do all that, simultaneously. Getting a little bit worried about some of like the pitching injuries we're seeing, Jared Jones, we can talk about that a little bit. Not, he's a guy I've talked about a couple times already in the last few episodes that I was excited about. And so I'm not a huge fan of this like series. Like I kind of, I like getting up early and like watching the Dodgers Cubs series. I hate that it's like wait so much before the rest of, the opening day stuff. That kind of like annoys me, old man that yells at cloud kind of stuff.
I'm totally out on it too, by the way. Like, not sorry to interrupt, but like I'm with you. It would be, I didn't mind it. Like they did it the 1 year to like try it out and have some fun with it. I have no interest in it being an annual thing.
Yeah, even if it was just like a few days before opening day, where it was just kind of like, a soft opening kind of a thing where, give them an extra day off to get back and, get their legs underneath them. But like the fact that it's like 10 days before opening day, it like, from a fantasy perspective, it throws up everything for us. So that's obnoxious. So I
don't want it at all. I want opening day to be, the only thing I'm okay with is like the night before opening day. If you want to do like some kind of Sunday night baseball type thing the night before a big primetime game to start off, I'm okay with that. Besides that,
because football does the Hall of Fame game, or no, that's the preseason. But this is
that's preseason.
Football does that like Thursday opener.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Thursday, like first one. I would be okay with that. I want opening day to be opening day. I like that is really meaningful to me. I don't like the soft launch.
Yeah, same.
Do you have any takeaways from that series, by the way? I mean, I certainly was not, especially on the mountain time, I was not getting up early to watch those games live. I checked the box scores, but any kind of takeaways from you from whatever you saw getting up early to watch it?
A few minor ones. Don't love the Freddie Freeman being scratched with a rib injury. That's kind of like the same situation he dealt with like in the playoffs. I don't love that going into the season. Very excited about Tommy Edman. He's someone I have been in on as kind of like a bounce back candidate. Missed the beginning of last year, now on a really good Dodgers team. I know they had a bunch of players out, but he was playing second base and batting really high in that lineup and hit a home run this morning. Very excited about that and the potential there. I think playing time is going to be weird for all Dodgers players, but if you're someone like Tommy Edman who can play like pretty much every position, Dave Roberts likes to mix and match. He might end up with a ton of eligibility playing pretty much every day, giving you a little bit of power, a little bit of speed, solid, not like great batting average, but like not a detriment batting average. So Tommy Edman is exciting to me. Roki Sasaki looked electric, but also kind of all over the place. So that's something to keep an eye on.
A lot of emotions, right? Like first star happening overseas. Like I'm willing to forgive that.
Yeah. I did think it was very cool that 3 of the 4 starting pitchers over there were Japanese.
Yeah, that is a cool
not that that's a takeaway.
It was no, but it was like the right to. It felt like a fitting 2 teams to be over there, right? To kind of get that added, angle to it.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Justin Steele. Like I said, it's early and it's the Dodgers, so like I'm not overly worried about Justin Steele. I think he's gonna be fine. Yamamoto looked fine. Imanaga looked fine.
Yeah.
Other than that,
I mean, it's a 2-game series. How much are you changing your ranks?
Yeah. Ohtani is Ohtani
related stuff. Yeah. Before we dive into today's episode, where we're going to be predicting some yearbook superlatives for the season, things like most likely to succeed, stuff like that. I want to highlight some of the bold predictions that the commenters left on last week's episode. They were bolder than our predictions, I will say. Some of these really stood out. Jose Miranda winning the batting title. Don't know that I think that's going to happen. What do you think? What would you put the odds of that happening at?
I'll put it at low. I think it would be more likely he doesn't have enough at bats to qualify for the batting title than it is that he wins the batting title. But I know he is a player that a lot of people like. I just I've yet to see it from him.
Yeah, last year he hit 284 for whatever it's worth.
Mhm.
We'll leave it at that. Casey Mize winning the Cy Young, I think even bolder than the Miranda pick, I would say. Former top pick, right? Like there's a degree of pedigree here, but we certainly have not seen anything to suggest a Cy Young outing coming from him. What was your reaction to reading that bold prediction?
Um, Also unlikely. I get it though. He's like someone who's kind of tweaked a bunch of things this offseason. He looks really good in spring training. He has like 11 shutout innings with 14
You know my
strikeouts. He
thoughts on
looks,
spring training stats.
of course, of course. But yeah, like people are excited about him. So like Cy Young is probably too ambitious, but can he bounce back and be relevant? I think that's possible.
I'm totally on board with Mize. Like, if the purpose of coming up with the bold prediction is to say, from the fantasy perspective, maybe this is somebody you want to take a flyer on. His ADP is 350th. So in a really deep league with like your last pick or something, I'm actually super on board with that.
Hmm.
Given that he does look good in the spring, and again, there's real significant pedigree here. I love the boldness. I mean, it's a fun call, but if you believe in that one, go put some money down and you can make yourself very, very rich. And then the other one, Nick Pivetta to lead the NL in strikeouts. How about this one?
I mean, he does strike out a lot of batters. He's never top 200 strikeouts in a season before. He's probably going to need to do that if he wants to win, most strikeouts in the National League. He's always been a pitcher who's like flashed the stuff. Results have been mixed, but does strike out batters. But yeah, probably unlikely he's going to lead the league, I
It,
would say.
it feels like he needs to get deeper into games and just get more innings for that to happen. I mean, look at the last 4 years: 155 innings, 179 and 2/3, 142 and 2/3, 145 and 2/3. Being around that 150 inning mark, he does get strikeouts. Yes, that's not going to be enough at his strikeout rate to get there, barring something really unforeseen. So, um,
Yeah.
you know, that maybe a less bold prediction than the other ones we just threw out, but still definitely under the category of bold. Keep those comments coming on the videos. Share your thoughts on everything we talk about, and we'll be sure to highlight them on the show. Any good ones? Let's dive into our yearbook superlatives, Mayor. We came up with 4 categories that we're each going to come up with our superlative player for. Some of them we kind of took liberties with how we defined the superlative. There's not a lot of one-to-one kind of options for this, but we wanted to kind of get creative and have fun with it. So we got 4 categories that we're both going to pick our superlative for. And then the 5th one, we each kind of did a dealer's choice where we're going to come up with our own for the final category. We're going to start off with the most obvious one that you had to include, which is most likely to succeed. It's kind of the cliche yearbook superlative out there. Different ways to interpret most likely to succeed. I know that we actually did kind of approach this from 2 different angles. Why don't you go first and kind of explain how you approached it?
Sure. So I saw your name first, and I know I definitely took a different approach. I approached it more from most likely to succeed, kind of if you're looking at either the kid in high school who is just like solid, really reliable student, or if you're looking at it from like an early workplace, worker or employee, just a guy that he could win like employee of the year. Like he just shows up, does a good job every day. You always know he's going to be there. He's reliable. So I went with Bryan Reynolds, who is a guy that I think you can draft on your team, who is just you just pretty much know what you're going to get from him every year. He plays every day. You're going to get like 24 home runs from him. I was going to say 25, but in 3 of the last 4 years, he hit exactly 24. So you're going to get 24 home runs from him. He's going to bat between 260, 275. He's probably going to steal 10 bases, drive in 80 runs, score 80 runs. Not a prohibitive ADP. And he's someone that I always find myself taking in those like early to middle round, that like early mid round range, where I'm just like, you know what? Let me draft a solid floor player who I know that I can just rely on for just solid production across the board.
I want to read just some of the phrases that Kelly used in her expert note in the blurb we have on the site for Bryan Reynolds. All of these appear in just one paragraph about him: dependable, consistent, reliable, unfazed by ups and downs, not much flash, reliability, steadier floor. Every one of those appears in just this one paragraph, which I think really highlights your point of, what the floor is with somebody like Reynolds. But my friends and I have a joke, like a just running bit, where we call Bryan Reynolds the best player in baseball, similar to how we talked about Ranger Suarez as the best pitcher in baseball last year on this show. Obviously he's not that, but his ranking right now in ECR is 79th. He's outfield, 23. Just like a perfectly reasonable spot to be in. I'll be totally happy to get him there. If I miss out on him, I'll be okay with that because there'll be other options. But just like you said, he's very much a steady Eddie. I think that's spot on.
Yep. Thanks. And consensus ADP is 84, and in some formats he's pushing past 90, and like just such like solid production for that ADP.
So you approach most likely to succeed from the angle of a guy that you are really confident will succeed to some level. I approach it from success as the guy who's kind of going to most outperform their draft position. And I didn't want to go, because there will be guys who are drafted in like the 250 range who, yes, technically are going to more outperform guys that are drafted higher. But I really wanted to go not pure bang for your buck, but the guy kind of that where they are going in their drafts, I think they could bring your team success. I think they could be a variation of a league winner. Not a breakout, because the guy I picked is somebody who's had success before, but somebody who I think is really undervalued by ADP and I think is going to really succeed for your team where they are going if they hit their ceiling or even get close to it. That's Shane McClanahan for me. We talked about him, I think, on the second episode of this show when we brought it back for this year. I believe it was somebody that I'm all over at cost. We have talked a bit on the show about the risk and the upside play of somebody like Spencer Strider, coming back from injury, but what the talent is. McClanahan is starting the season with the Rays. Like the injury, like I say, it's entirely behind him because of course there might be questions about innings usage and stuff like that. But he was like borderline coming back at the end of last season. He is back for opening day. That is not a concern outside of just how much usage they want to give him this year. It's been long enough from that injury. So unlike somebody like Strider, that's not a question mark for me. We know how good McClanahan is when he's actually pitching. The two most recent years he pitched, obviously not in 2024, but he was an all-star in 2022. He was an all-star in 2023. He is somebody who, like, again, the innings, I think if you're gonna have a problem with him, it's how much do they let him dive right in. The Rays are really smart. I think they'll find a way, and I think they expect to win. So I think they're going to find a way to kind of keep him around for the bulk of the season. Strikes out more than a batter per inning. ERA under 3 across the last 2 seasons that he pitched. 23 wins across those seasons. Like the Rays are going to win games. I just think he's a good pitcher who is going in the 13th round. Well, depends on how many teams in your league. Maybe like the 11th round in a 12-team league, 13th round in a 10-team league. But something like that is like, I just think that's great value for the ceiling you can get of one of the better pitchers in baseball.
Yeah, I honestly don't have a ton to add because I pretty much agree with you across the board. I know when we talked about him a few weeks ago, I'm very in on him, especially at his ADP. ADP is around 122. This is a guy with clear SP1 upside. We've seen it before. He's kind of forgotten because he didn't pitch last year. He could have, like you said, Spencer Strider, even though he looked really good the other day, he might not, probably will not start the season on the Braves. He might not only miss like 2-3 weeks, but Shane McClanahan could have returned towards the end of 2024, and they didn't. They just kind of, let him rest, and now he's ready to go. Consensus projections have him for about 160 innings. I think you can push 175, 180 easy. If like you said, the Rays kind of like space him out a little bit, they're going to be most likely in contention towards the end of the season, so they're not just going to shut him down. I think we're just going to see more creative usage out of him. The Rays are also a team that have a quick trigger for pulling pitchers. Like he might just do a lot of like 5-inning starts where they just like, he's only at 75 pitches, but they pull him because that's something that they do too, especially with, a pitcher coming back from injury. But I think you're going to get really good value out of him. The last full season we saw from him, 166 innings, 194 strikeouts, 2.54 ERA. And I don't know if you're going to get quite that production, but it's also like a perfect ADP to gamble on, maybe you will. And I don't think you're going to get poor production from him. I'm really excited about everything you will get from him.
If I guaranteed you 150 innings from him this year, where would you think he should be ranked? Like what round should you be looking to draft him?
Um,
And I guess the way I'm kind of framing the question is set aside health and usage as just a pitcher, and in terms of talent level and the stats he will provide, what's your confidence level that we're going to see him kind of return to form?
I mean, I'm pretty confident. I have him at 109 right now, and I'm confident taking him inside the top 100. Like, and I have, I think, in a recent draft. I've taken him inside the top 100 in a draft.
He's
Over
ranked
Bryan
behind
Reynolds.
Strider, by the way, just by a few spots, but he's both ranked and ADP behind Strider, which
I have him right. I have him right in front of Strider in my
I
rankings.
get it. I get the appeal of the allure of Strider, but like McClanahan's a good pitcher, and we know he's starting the season healthy.
Yeah. So I was just updating my rankings this morning. Where do I have them? Oh no, I do have Strider ahead of him, but I'm probably going to keep tweaking. So like I have a long like process for updating my rankings. I did the bulk of the updating this morning, and now I have to go through and do some manual updates. But Strider's way above him because of what he did the other day. But I do continue to bump Shane McClanahan up my rankings. I have him at SP 27 right now.
Yeah, I think that should be higher, and that's why I have him as most likely to succeed. I think he's going to really outperform that. I'm buying into the health, and obviously we know what the talent is. I do want to let everybody know that we are giving away a John Smoltz signed Braves jersey, courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com. All you have to do to enter is to subscribe to the Fantasy Pros MLB YouTube channel right now. Drop a comment below on any video, and that is it. We will be announcing one lucky winner right here on the channel. So make sure to turn on those notifications so you can know when new videos are up and to claim your prize. All right, the next category we have here, Maher, is biggest flirt. This is a fun one from real high school. And the way we're kind of approaching this, and I actually pitched to you a way of approaching this that I then kind of tweaked the way I went about it. The way I kind of pitched it to you is a player that keeps enticing you with their tools. They keep flirting with that true, real breakout, but they never quite put it together. I actually kind of came up with a different angle to it. It's somebody who has broken out. They have put it together before, but they keep flirting with a healthy bounce back season and have not gotten there. So I'm going to say Christian Yelich's 2024 season is the biggest flirt because it looked like he was kind of, I mean, all the way back, not obviously not in terms of health because he didn't even play half a season. But when he was on the field, he looked better than he had in a couple of years, to the point where he, I mean, could have easily been a league winner for you if he had stayed healthy throughout the season. Obviously, it doesn't end up happening. He gets hurt. What did he play? 70 something games? I think it was
73.
73. Yeah, I'm pulling it up here. Yeah, 73. But in those 73 games, he had 11 home runs. He had 21 stolen bases in less than half a season. And he was batting .315, which is higher than he had hit in this decade. It had been since 2019 since he had a batting average that high. OBP over 400 again. That was his best since 2019. While still on this, 24-ish home run pace. And of course, a close to 50 stolen base pace. So he looked awesome. I am saying that what ends up being a bit of a flirtation with, Christian Yelich, superstar fantasy, gold is back. And I'm just not trusting somebody who's now getting into their mid 30s with this injury history to be able to put it all together once more as a healthy stud. What do you think about this pick?
Well, real quick question for you. Who do you think has a better chance of staying healthy this year? Christian Yelich or Mike Trout?
I almost made the Trout comparison here. Of the two, I would say you have to pick Yelich because at least it's not like the 2 years before he maybe wasn't playing at the same level that we had seen him, at his peak, but he did play 144 games in 2023 and 154 games in 2022. Mike Trout would do unspeakable things to hit those numbers again. He hasn't hit those numbers in ages. So I mean, I think it has to be Yelich, right? Even though I consider them both to be real injury risks.
Yeah, so Kelly always gets on me when we're doing shows together or even when we're talking in YouTube comments together because I am always in on Yelich and I'm always, hoping for the bounce back. I'm always taking the value because he's always like depressed in drafts because of the injury stuff. I was in on him a ton last year, and I was very excited with those returns until it all fell apart. I'm likewise doing it again this year. I've taken him in a bunch of mock drafts. I don't know that I have any real life shares. I do have one real life share, but I think that's in a keeper league where I kept him. But yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to see the power like we saw before, even though we saw like flashes of it last year. I think, 20 home runs is his ceiling at this point in his career. But also, like, if you can get, an average around 280 and 2020 outside of the top 100 picks, you're gambling on the health. But, if you can guarantee he's going to stay healthy, which you can't, I mean, that's still really good production for
What
that late in the draft outside top 100.
for me, like at this stage in his career, I worry about, and I actually almost included Ronald Acuna in a different category we have coming up because I'm worried about coming off the injury, what that's going to mean for his stolen bases. At this point in Yelich's career, if the stolen bases goes down because of the injury stuff, he's not, I don't think, going to be making up for it with extra power. The batting average will still be good, but if instead of being on this, 35, 40 stolen base pace, then he just does go like 2020 and maybe even less than that if they just are worried about keeping him healthy. That concerns me from the downside. And I think the pace he was on last year, especially with the rate stats being as strong as they were. I mean, he was over 900 OPS again for the first time since 2019 with that, 20 plus home run, like close to 50 stolen base pace. I worry that's going to be a flirtation that entices a lot of people because the cost isn't prohibitive. So I think a lot of people will
Right.
see that and say, oh, this is somebody who can be like a league winner because we kind of saw it last year. Now he's back healthy, going outside the top 100. I find myself a bit concerned.
The one thing also to be concerned about him more so than some of these other players we've talked about with injury concerns, his injury concerns are the same injury. It's a chronic back issue
Yes.
that keeps popping up. It's not like these random, like, he like broke his hand sliding to second base or tore his ACL. This is a chronic back issue that he just had surgery on.
Maher, I'm not the first person to say this, but it's one of those true idioms out there. Nobody ever used to have back problems.
Right.
Once you get them, you have back problems. And playing as an elite professional athlete, that's concerning.
I thought you were about to refer to yourself as an elite professional athlete. Like, as an elite professional athlete,
No,
I can
no.
tell you all about back issues.
As a mediocre weekend warrior athlete, let me tell you about injury concerns. All right, who is your biggest flirt?
So mine is a slightly different take, but still kind of the same thing. I went with Jackson Holliday, and I'll explain my reasoning. And it's not that I don't think he's a great young player and he's a great young prospect. I think he is. I just think we saw the flashes in the minor leagues. We saw he came up last year and he struggled mightily. And we've seen the flashes. I think what happens this year. So you looked at 2024 as kind of the biggest flirt. I'm looking to 2025 as kind of the biggest flirt because I think, well, he's not being drafted. Where is he being drafted, Jackson Holliday? Outside of the top 180, 184. So I think some people are taking late round flyers on him, hoping that this is the year for the breakout. And I think you're, as an Orioles fan, I think you're hoping for the breakout too. I think this year he's the biggest flirt because I think we see flashes, but I think we see up and down production. I think he struggles a little bit here and there while ultimately flashing the potential that we know he has. But this year, I think is a year too early to bank on, to receive, the proper returns on that production. And I think, you're not going to get enough power and you're probably not going to get enough speed and the average isn't going to be there. So like as a fantasy asset this year, I think he's going to be a tease, even though we are going to see him flash the potential that we know he has.
It's interesting. When I first came up with this category, my thought process was going to be a guy who was really tooled up. Like Luis Robert, just kind of one of these like big, like power speed combos, but somebody who like,
It's a Byron Buxton award.
yes, so the Byron Buxton Memorial Award is kind of the thought. Um, Neither of us went in that direction for two different reasons,
Mm-hmm.
because that's not really Holiday's game. He's tooled up in the sense that his hit tool is supposed to be so excellent, and the batting eye, he actually did bulk up too. So maybe we see some of the more physical tools as well come through this year. I find Holliday really fascinating. We've talked about him on a couple of episodes. I know Joe has talked about him a lot with Welsh on this feed. I find myself on the one hand saying the last two number one prospects that the Orioles had Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson both struggled to different degrees than Holliday, but they both really did struggle when they first came up to the big leagues. And then after a short adjustment period, for Gunnar, it did mean waiting until the start of the next season. For Adley, it was later in that first season because he came up earlier. But for both of them, after a short adjustment period, they then became excellent players. So on the one hand, you almost just want to give the benefit of the doubt to the Orioles player development machine when it comes to these elite hitting prospects, because we've seen this play out before. And well, of course, the next guy in that line of number one overall prospects in the sport is going to struggle a bit with the adjustment, and then he's going to put it all together and be amazing. At the same time, the struggle was more severe than it was for Gunnar or Adley. And he was better in his second stint in the majors, but it wasn't like he was this fantasy gold mine in the second stint, right? It was just better than the absolute disaster it was in April of last year. So I find him very difficult to rank. I find him difficult to project this year. I don't think he's going to end up playing enough shortstop to get that eligibility. I know some people have talked about that with kind of the injury to Gunnar. I would anticipate Gunnar is back early enough that it doesn't matter. And if he's not, that they go with somebody like Jorge Mateo and just let Holliday has enough going on to also be playing shortstop. Like, just let him hopefully dominate at second. So I think he's a really interesting choice by you, and I definitely don't disagree with it. I just really struggle to put my finger on what my evaluation and expectation is for Holliday this year.
Yeah, I struggle with that too. I'm probably not going to have a ton of shares just because I'm not going to take a ton of late round flyers on him. I worry. I know you're not worried about him getting sent down, but I worry about him struggling again and maybe getting sent down because he's still really young. And it's the kind of thing where, like, it's not like if a player gets hurt and then you can just put him on your IL and, you know, hopefully he comes back in a few weeks. Like, you're just stuck with that roster spot. You're like, do I have to drop him or do I just eat that roster spot for a few weeks? And in some leagues, it's easier to do than others. Some leagues you just don't have the deep bench to be able to do that. And then I also wonder, early in his career, as he's developing and as we're seeing this potential play out, is he going to be one of those players who's a better real life baseball player than a fantasy baseball player? Like, if he plays a full season and hits 14 home runs and bats 240, 250 and steals 14 bases, how valuable is that in fantasy? Because that's pretty much below a replacement level player, or maybe right about a replacement level player if you count all the counting stats together.
If he puts it all together, right, which, you know, who knows? If he does, then I'm actually really confident he'll be fantasy viable. I'm not saying he's going to be a fantasy superstar, but I think the batting average and I think the speed, I mean, his sprint speed was 95th percentile last year. But he could steal way more bases than he was allowed the opportunity to do this year. So in a world where it works out for him, let's say he's batting like 285 and on base, he has a good eye, on base percentage of like 360. I think a 30 stolen base season is not out of the cards, honestly. Now he has.
Do you know how many stolen bases he has this spring?
Probably not a lot.
5.
Oh, he's 5. Okay, I thought you were going to ask because it was like, oh, it's a really small number.
No, 5.
Again, that's more than he had in Major League Baseball last year. I think he could steal 30 bases in a season and give you a batting average close to 300 and some degree of pop. Like, again, he needs to take a real step to get here. I'm not projecting this kind of season, but whether it's this year or a few years from now, when he puts it together, I am very confident if he puts it together that it is a fantasy asset. It is like.
And I want to be clear. I think so too. I'm saying just this year. I think he's.
Just this. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought you were saying kind of down the line.
No, I think down the line. I just think for just this year only. I think this might be a year too early. I think down the line, I agree with you.
Okay, I think that then I think that's totally fair. Like, I would say it's a non-zero chance he's like really valuable in fantasy, but I think it's much more likely that he takes a leap, but that league just gets him to, okay, he's the everyday second baseman for a good team. It doesn't get him to, oh, now he's like a top 8 at the position in fantasy and a guy that's going to win you your league because you got him so late. I think that's actually really valid. All right, let's go to our next category here. Class clown, another classic one. And you came up with this kind of angle to it because you got to include class clown, but there's not like an obvious, like, it's not really, fantasy isn't personality based so much. So the way we're approaching this superlative is the player that if you take him could get you clowned for taking him when thinking about it a year from now. So the guy that at next year's draft, people are going to clown on you for where you took him. I'll let you go first this time.
So I want to be careful with my approach to this one because I don't want people to think I'm down on this player because I think he's very, very good. Now, if for the last category, the low hanging fruit for, the biggest flirt would probably have been Royce Lewis. For someone who just like has put it all together, but just, we're just not seeing it. But that's because he can't stay on the field. So for this one, the class clown, the player most likely to get you clowned. I think there's some low hanging fruit here. I think you took one of the ones that's an obvious case for how high he's going. I think another option could be Chris Sale for how high he's going. I went in a different angle of a player that I think is really good, but that you could get clowned for taking him because of how high he's going in drafts right now. And that's William Contreras. His ADP is consensus 33. I'm seeing that he's creeping into the second round in some drafts. And I don't care how good a catcher is, in most years, unless you're like a really special catcher, like maybe those Buster Posey years, when he was putting out elite production, or if you want to go back to like the late 90s, early 2000s, when there were catchers hitting 30 plus home runs and batting 315 all the time.
I remember some years when Joe Mauer was going in the first round.
Joe Mauer, yeah, like he's like a batting title candidate.
Yeah.
So William Contreras is really valuable for a bunch of reasons. One, catcher's not that deep. Two, he plays every day, whether it's catching or DH. He played 155 games last year. There aren't many catchers that do that. And when he does play, he's really good. 280, he batted 281 with 23 home runs, and he stole 9 bases as a catcher. I just have a hard time getting there on taking a catcher in, the late second, early third round where he's going, because even if you look at that production, that's really great production for a catcher. For a regular player, it's pretty average production. I mean, granted, you throw in the runs and RBIs and the value's there. Like he's a really, elite producer across the board. It's just hard for me to project a catcher because he played every day last year. The year before he played 141 games. And it's just not that easy to play every day as a catcher and hold up and continue to produce like this. And for me, it's another situation where I've talked about a bunch this year where you're drafting a player at his ceiling, which is what we're doing with William Contreras right now, is what I don't like to do. Because if he doesn't reach his ceiling, then you're not getting return on that value. I want to draft upside. And if you're drafting him at a ceiling, hoping that you're going to get 280 batting average, 23 plus home runs, like, almost 200 runs and RBIs. What if he plays 10, 15 fewer games? What if instead of 23 home runs, he hits like 18 home runs? And what if instead of 280, he bats 270? Now he's not a second round pick. And there's also a world where, catchers get banged up, and it's hard to, just how some people are kind of risk averse to drafting pitchers early because of so many pitcher injuries, catchers get hurt a lot too. And they get really, even if like they just get banged up and they miss a week, catchers get hurt all the time. It's a really rough position to play for several months and stay both healthy and productive. And for me, it's just really hard to get there taking him that early. So I think there's a chance that, you get to your draft next year and, you don't finish high in your draft, and they're looking at who got drafted where last year, and they're like, boy, I can't believe you took a catcher in the second round last year.
I think this is a terrible pick, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because I think barring an injury, it's really unlikely anybody other than maybe Adley Rutschman finishes better than William Contreras this year. The durability, and again, set aside the possibility for an injury, but the durability that he has, the fact that he's just a good hitter, like I just don't like. Adley has the skill set to maybe put it all together, and he did get hurt partway through last year. So if he's healthy, I could see Adley finishing one. I can't see any other catcher finishing ahead of William Contreras this year. So even if it is not the best kind of game theory, it's not the best roster building strategy to take a catcher in the early third or maybe even as high as the second. I don't even want to say diehards, but like the people like us would say, oh, that was a mistake. If you're in your league and you take William Contreras in the third round and we say, that's like a little rich for my blood, I don't think most leagues are going to clown you for it because you're still going to get a top 2 catcher. I would imagine is the most likely outcome. And I don't think people are going to clown you for that. I think they might say, oh, that wouldn't be my strategy. But unless he is really bad, I don't think you're getting clowned, right? Like that's That's kind of my thought process is it might be a bad decision, but I don't think people are making fun of you for taking the best catcher in fantasy baseball, the consensus number one guy. If you look at our ECR, it shows best ranking and worst ranking. His worst ranking is number one. He is as consensus gets as catcher one, and he deserves it. I don't think that's getting you clowned, in my opinion.
I think you can get clowned if I'm in your league and I take Wilson Contreras outside the top 100 and he outproduces William Contreras this year.
Wilson Contreras, I have to tell you this, went in the first round of a draft I did the other week. It's a keeper draft. So, but only 50 players were kept. And there were a lot of good players on the board. And my buddy and I, we were like doing a virtual chat during the draft. We looked at it. We were like, does he think he just took William Contreras? Like we could not figure out what had led to this. And William Contreras was not available. He was kept. So I was like, it blew my mind. There were a lot of good players on the board, and he went with Wilson Contreras. So
it happened in a salary cap draft league that I did as well, where we are fairly confident the person thought it was William Contreras.
It feels like the only explanation. All right, so that's your pick. I think it's a bad one. My pick, I actually think this is the single most obvious pick of any superlative we're talking about, at least in my opinion, in the way I'm approaching drafts. I have Jacob deGrom. I actually, it's funny. I didn't think of him immediately. My first thought was I was thinking of some other players. I was thinking maybe like Acuna, depending on how high you took him, because I do think he's going to be a step down this year if he's running less. And we kind of saw he took a little bit of a step back in that first year back anyway. Also, we don't know 100% when he's going to be back on the field anyway. But like, I don't think you get clowned for taking Acuna because it's purely an upside play if you do that, right? I don't think you get clowned if you take Chris Sale because it's like, listen, dude was insanely good last year. It's a risk going in. It's a risk going in with Jacob deGrom, and yet he is still 60th in ECR. Maher, I have been talking about this all preseason. I do not understand this. I cannot wrap my head around why deGrom is so highly ranked. So that's just in the rankings. In ADP, he's even a few spots higher at 56.
Have you seen where he's going on NFBC?
56 overall. 46th is what we're
46.
showing on the site. I don't get that. He has pitched in the last 3 years 10 and 2/3 innings, 30 and a third innings, 64 and a third innings. The year before that was 92 innings. The year before that was 2020, 68 innings. I know there was a reason he only pitched 68 innings, but still, that's a year of not building up the arm. He has not pitched even 100 innings in a season since 2019, and he's only topped 70 innings in a season once since then. I do not understand. And oh, by the way, he's 36 years old? You don't get healthier as you get older. I know
Turns
that
37 in June.
I know Jacob deGrom is a really good pitcher. I love watching him pitch when he's healthy. And I know those 3 games he pitched last year, he had 14 strikeouts and 1 walk, an ERA under 170. Like I know he is a very, very good pitcher. This is the number one red flag in this range of draft. Because again, you're not getting any injury discount on him. This is the biggest red flag to me on the entire board in the top 100 picks, maybe in the top 150. I can't think of any player at any position going at a range that I think is this crazy high to this degree because of injury reasons. I do not get it. I will not understand it. He will be on 0 of my teams if the cost stays where it is, which we're only a week away from opening day. So it's clearly has staying power to be this high. Tell me why I'm crazy, because I think this is absurd.
I think it's a terrible pick. No, I think it's fine. I actually think when I was talking, he was one of the players I was talking about where it's a low-hanging fruit. I actually almost said his name by accident when I was talking about names you could pick until I glanced at the sheet and remembered that Jacob deGrom was who you picked. And so I was really close to ruining your pick for you and really spoiling it for everyone listening and giving away your pick. But no, I think he's one of the obvious picks just because of the steam has just gotten insane. I get it. He can be really, really good. He just hasn't pitched, and there's already talk. We talked about it a bunch recently. There's already talk about limiting his workload. He's only thrown 2 innings in the spring, and we know they're going to be careful with him. And it's just you're just paying too high of a price. I talk about drafting a guy's ceiling. You're not drafting him at his ceiling, but you're drafting him way more than I'm willing to for the risk involved.
You know what I'm going to say? You are drafting him at his ceiling. His ceiling is, I don't think, a full healthy season. I just don't think he can do it. And I hope I'm wrong, truthfully. I would love to see Jacob deGrom have a healthy year. It would be so much fun. I think his health ceiling is such that I don't think he can give you value on this pick where he's going. I don't think it's possible.
How many innings does he give you this year?
I would be, I don't know how you can go in confidently projecting 100 innings. I don't know how you can. Okay. What do you think the answer is?
I don't know. I was looking at consensus projections to cheat a little bit, and it's funny you say you can't confidently project not 100 innings, but the innings in general, because a lot of times you look at these projections and they're pretty similar, like a little bit tweak here, tweak there, like, some are more aggressive than others. They're all over the place for Jacob deGrom. The highest is Steamer, which is, they're pretty aggressive with some of their things, more than some of the other ones that I talk about always being conservative. They have 152 innings. I don't think you have a prayer at seeing 152 innings.
Even if he doesn't get hurt, they're not going to let him pitch 152 innings.
Yeah, probably not. And the other ones are all between 110 and 132.
Again, I want to be really clear. I would love to be wrong. Okay, I would be thrilled to be incorrect about this, because Jacob deGrom is like arguably the most fun pitcher to watch when he's on of the last 15 years. He is awesome at pitching, and I would guess still pretty good. Right. I mean, again, we haven't seen it that much in actual real major league games the last couple of years. I mean, he's only got 40 innings the last 2 years combined. But in those 40 innings, he had 59 strikeouts and 5 walks. He had an ERA. I'm not going to do the math because I don't have it in front of me. But one year was 169. The other year was 267. So a very good ERA. Like, I have no doubt he's still good, because that arm is incredible. I could not have more doubt about him staying healthy. And if it was baked into the cost better, I would be super in on you get into the hundreds, where you're picking. Yeah, take a shot. What's the worst? You're going to miss out on somebody who's probably not going to be a league winner for you anyway. Take a chance. I totally get it. If you take Jacob deGrom in round 5, I think you will get clowned if he gets hurt in early May and misses 4 months. Like, I think this is a guy who will get you clowned, who should get you clowned. And I think you're insane if you're taking him this high. It's probably the most emphatic, passionate I feel about any player ranking this whole draft season, is that I think Jacob deGrom is too high. Because again, I feel like I'm missing something is the thing. I'm not angry at people who are taking him up. Please take him off the board. He wasn't a player I was going to pick there, but I feel confused. Like, I feel like I'm missing something. I don't get where this confidence that he's healthy is, or that he can be even remotely healthy. Because again, it's been 6 years since we saw a season like the one you're projecting in terms of the innings. And I think that's a really optimistic projection. I think it's much more likely he throws 60 innings this year than he throws 120. I will say that's my thought on it.
Yeah, you're probably right.
So I hate to say it, because again, I love the player, but I want to let everybody know that you can dominate your fantasy baseball draft with our fantasy baseball draft kit. View expert cheat sheets and rankings to build your perfect team, access up-to-date projections and expert recommendations on sleepers, busts, must-have players, and more. Premium subscribers can gain access to our entire Discord, where they can interact directly with our analysts through AMAs and other hardcore fantasy baseball fanatics. Bookmark our fantasy baseball draft kit at fantasypros.com/draft kit for new fantasy baseball advice every single day throughout the fantasy baseball draft season. Also, if you get access to our Discord, our home run calls contest, I assume that's coming back, right, Maher?
We've already started. We're already in there.
Heck yeah. Love to hear it. So be sure to sign up to get access to the Discord for that, especially. All right, we got one more.
Draft kit is also updated daily by your boy.
I thought it might be. All right, last shared award here. We wanted to kind of give a nod to the Dundies from The Office, the show from The Office. So we're going to go with the Hottest in The Office award. Unfortunately, Ryan Howard is no longer a professional baseball player, so we can't make that fun connection. The way we're treating this Hottest in The Office award is kind of the player who's most hyped heading into the ceiling. Guy who's a lot of helium. And I when I first sat down to think about my choice for this, I was thinking from the angle of a guy whose ADP has risen a lot. The guy I'm going to pick hasn't really risen a lot. There's just a lot of hype from where his ADP started off relative to what we've seen from him already. I went with James Wood. And I want to be really clear about something because I've picked him on some other lists we've done in previous shows. We're not saying that the hottest in the office award is somebody that is overhyped incorrectly. We're just saying this is somebody who has a lot of hype surrounding them, kind of relative to what we've seen before. I don't think this is incorrect. I agree with it. I love James Wood. He's going higher than I wish he was, but he's not going so high that I'm not on board with it. All right, he's still in the 50s. He hasn't kind of risen, up into round 4 and earlier. And in the rankings, he's 51. That's gone up a few spots. But in the 5th round, I think the upside is immense with him. I think the Nationals are a team that will allow you to run. So I would not be surprised. I mean, in half a season, he had 14 stolen bases. That projects out to 30. I think if he gets on base at a better rate in year 2, and they did let him kind of unleash a little bit, I think he could get to 40 stolen bases. I wouldn't predict that. I think it's on the table. I think a 25-40 season, there's a non-zero chance it happens. I think he's that good. I love the player. I think the Nats are going to give him every opportunity to be a superstar. And I think we're going to see improvement in the rate stats too in year 2. He hit the ball on the ground a little too much when he first came up last year. I'm counting on him kind of improving that. I mean, even with that said, he was still on like a 20 homer pace. I think he's awesome. I think the hype is deserved, but I'm putting him for this award because we've only seen half a season from him. He's still really young. He didn't exactly put it all together last year, and he's going almost inside the top 50. So there's definitely a lot of hype there. I think I'm on board. I think it's deserved.
Yeah, I'm on board with James Wood. One of the low hanging fruit picks for this topic would have been Jackson Chourio, but we've talked about Jackson Chourio a ton recently, so we don't have to dive back into Jackson Chourio. And the people have heard our takes on Jackson Chourio, but they've also heard me talk about players I'd rather take later in drafts than Jackson Chourio. And even though James Wood is not going as late as I would like you said, he is going 3 rounds later than Jackson Chourio, and is another player who could potentially outproduce him. Not saying that he will, but saying that it's within his range of outcomes based on his skill set. And he's going outside the top 50. And like you said, I'd prefer that to be like 70, 75 and not 50. But I also really like the player. And he is someone, like I talked about earlier, where you're not taking him at his ceiling. You're projecting upside. And I do think he has upside much higher than where he's going right now.
And I look at some of the names that are around him in ADP, at least a few spots ahead of him. Michael Harris, Marcell Ozuna is 1 spot ahead of him. CJ Abrams, 1 spot behind him. Teoscar Hernandez, Yamamoto. deGrom is 4 spots behind him in ADP. Framber, Michael Kidd. Like, I would just rather take that swing on James Wood than any of those guys, truthfully.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
All right. Nothing else to add.
Great. I knocked it out of the park. Like, hopefully James Wood does a lot of this year. Who is your
also? James said I do have more to add. 4 home runs in the spring. I know you love spring training stats.
I do when they confirm my priors. Who's your hottest in the office?
My hottest in the office is another name we talked about a little bit recently, Roki Sasaki. And like you said, actually, not saying that he will or will not live up to the hype, but just someone that is the most hyped. And a lot of it is because he's the shiny new toy. We don't know what we're going to get. We've seen him throw 100, his first 3 pitches this morning were all 100 miles an hour. And that's pretty fun. And we've seen the tools. Prior to, just spring training and this morning when he debuted, we hadn't seen a lot of Roki Sasaki. So it's a lot of just projecting and excitement about like the tools and what we've like learned and heard about him. And so he's someone that a lot of people are struggling to figure out where to draft, where to rank. And so he's someone who's got a lot of hype, and we're not really sure if it's justified or not based on, we just don't have enough information yet.
I, for most of draft season, have really been very interested in Roki, where he's going. I get the concerns, especially the Dodgers of it all, and the fact that they don't need him to pitch that much. Like, to me, that's a larger concern than how he will be when he is on the mound. I know we kind of said already, like at the top of the show, looked maybe a little erratic for part of it, but like the arm talent is so obvious. I really think his splitter might be like one of the 5 best pitches in baseball already.
Wow.
I maybe that's projecting out a bit, but I think it could be this season. Honestly, I think it's that good. Like, that is one thing where I don't care very much about spring stats, but just watching him this spring just watching one of his splitters, and I'm like sold. I don't need to see another pitch to think this guy's really awesome. So I think you're right, though, because other people have seen those clips and have seen, the hype starting to build and stuff like that. Also, just when you see a starting pitcher throw 100 miles an hour, it's really exciting. But yeah, I think this is a good pick here.
Yeah, and his ADP is pushing inside the top 100.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I want to go backwards really quickly. Speaking of pitchers who can hit 100 miles per hour, I meant to throw this guy's name out and I didn't. So I just want to very quickly, in that most likely to succeed portion, I went with McClanahan because his ADP is lower. I very strongly considered Hunter Green. I think Hunter Green's ADP is like borderline disrespectful right now, given what he did last year. It's in 94th. I actually just wrote him up for a Featured Pros article that we have coming on the site soon as a pitcher in that range that I really like. His stats last year were very good, and like some of the expected stats were like a little worse, but they were still very good. A lot of it was like 89th, 90th percentile if you look on StatCast in terms of stuff like, expected ERA and things like that. And what we actually got was the most innings he's thrown in a season in his career, 150. I know still, a little bit of injury stuff, but 150 innings, more than strikeout per inning, an ERA under 3. His expected ERA was still right at around 3, a whip of 102. And I think there's room for another step forward. He's 25 years old. We know the arm talent. I was unfamiliar with this stat, but I saw in researching that blurb that he leads Major League Baseball in Pro Stuff Plus this year, or this spring so far. So the arm talent, obviously I don't need to tell everybody that Hunter Green has a great arm, but I think an ADP in the 90s is wild for him. Like you're telling me Hunter Green's ADP is in the 90s and Jacob deGrom's is in the 50s. Like that, it blows my mind. So I wanted to shout him out quickly because when you mentioned Roki, that reminded me I had meant to bring him up as well. Before we get to our last category,
Hunter Green.
What I was gonna say, any quick thoughts on Green before we get to the last category?
No, I was actually going to ask you, because I was looking at ADP while you were talking before, if you would rather have Hunter Green or Roki Sasaki, and I think you answered my question.
I would rather have Hunter Green, but I like them both where they're going. All right. So the last category here, I'll go first. So I didn't tell you who my pick is here. I went with most gullible, which is another fun real life high school superlative. My most gullible is you, Mike Maher, for being in on Mike Trout again this year.
I love it.
We've talked about this a bit. We talked about it with Scott Pianowski on the Fest, also on some of our other shows. So we don't need to spend too much time on it. But I think this is Lucy with the football and you're Charlie Brown. I don't think Mike Trout is. I mean, it is not to the same level as I feel about Jacob deGrom. It's not far off in terms of my concern level for getting a full season out of him. You asked me about Trout earlier in the show, and I didn't want to reveal that I had you as this pick in regards to Trout. But yes, I again, you cannot have any degree of confidence that Mike Trout is going to have a healthy season. And I think you are setting yourself up for disappointment. And much like Jacob deGrom, I really hope I'm wrong. Baseball is better when Mike Trout is good, but I think you're being gullible here.
Well, I'm really. I didn't prepare a speech. I don't know what to say now. I don't. I want to thank God and my mom for believing in me, and thank everyone for this Dundee for most gullible.
I feel God in this Chili's tonight.
Great reference. Yeah, I felt a little bit more strongly about him when ADP was closer to 100. Now it's pushing into the 80s, which is making me less excited about it because those 2 rounds really do matter at that point, even though I took him at like 94 in a recent draft. But yeah, I mean, I'm fully aware that I'm gambling, and I'm just, I want to go fast. I want to. I want to take the leap, take the gamble. And so I'm fully aware of the risk, and I know it could be foolish, but here I am, ready to do it all over again.
We have a salary cap draft coming up that you and I are both in. We actually have 2. In the league where we have a $300 budget, and it's a deep keeper league. How much do you want to spend on Trout in a league like that? Because I think when you think about ADP, it's really easy to think about like kind of this range in the round. But when it comes time for a salary cap draft, you might have to decide earlier and not really know what your remaining budget is for the rest of your team yet if he gets nominated early. So somebody like Trout, like when you actually have to put a dollar amount to it, how much are you looking to spend on him in that kind of format?
Well, give me 1 second because I will put my money where my mouth is because I did purchase him in a salary cap
Okay.
draft. So what did you say the budget was? 300?
In our league, it's going to be 300 that we're drafting.
So this one is 260.
Okay.
But it's a big money draft. So I really had to gamble on it. I spent $17 on it.
Okay. I think I feel better about that than I do about drafting him, in the 80s. Like, I think 17 I'm a bit more comfortable with.
And I got Bryan Reynolds for 15.
Nice. You're steady Eddie. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to kind of put a number to it because we often talk about ADP in terms of the round, obviously, but there's a lot of salary cap drafts out there too. All right. What is your final category?
My final category is class couple. And I wanted to, my thinking here was kind of that strategy where mid to late in drafts, you kind of Frankenstein some production where maybe you take someone who hits a lot of home runs, not going to give you any much batting average or any speed, and you pair him with someone who does give you batting average and speed. And so my class couple is Jake Burger and Victor Robles, because I think you can get Jake Burger, and I think you're going to get a better Jake Burger season than we've seen. I think you're going to get 30 plus home runs and solid production for him across the board. Batting a little bit too low in the projected lineup, but I'm confident he will move up in that lineup. I don't think there's a ton blocking him if he gets hot. And I think you can get him. Where can you get him? It's not a prohibitive price.
112th.
112th, and I'm pairing him with Victor Robles, who's going much later, who's going later. 193.
That's moved up too. Robles was in the 200s.
Yeah. But I think you can get 30 plus home runs and like a 240-ish, 250 average from Jake Burger, maybe some solid RBI. And Victor Robles is someone who could hit 300, maybe 280, 290 and steal 40 plus bases for you. And so combining those two, again, it's 2 picks outside the top 100, one closer to 200, where when you start picking later in drafts, you're going to have to give up some production. You're not going to draft a perfect prospect every time. But you can kind of target those specific categories that you want, pair them together, and you get a perfect romantic couple like Jake Burger and Victor Robles.
I've been all over Robles this year. We've talked about him a bunch. I think he's one of the best late round picks you can target. And I think Burger's a great player to pair with him for all the reasons you laid out. I don't have anything to add to that. I think that's a great call. And especially where they're going, you can get them. Like this is not somebody you're gonna have to reach on. Robles, I mean, he does have some helium. Like I said, that ADP has gone up. So maybe you do reach around early to get him if you want to kind of go for a pairing like this. But I think he'll still be a good value a round or two ahead of even where his ADP is now. I think he's a great call. And like I said, I love the pairing. So I think that's great. We did it. We filled out our yearbook here.
All right. What a long, strange trip it's been.
Yeah. We'll go. Yeah. Hags, have a great summer. All right. We'll wrap up there.
In touch.
Yeah. If anybody has any other yearbooks superlatives they want to throw out, drop them in the comments. We'll read the best ones next week. Or if you have different player picks for some of the categories we went with today, be sure to share those as well. Next week, like I said, we are going to have an episode drop. I believe it should be dropping on opening day. So everybody can check that out. Maybe listen to it while you're watching your games throughout all day. I know that's opening day is very much a holiday in my household. So I'm really looking forward to that. Hopefully everybody enjoys the episode. We're going to be talking biggest questions heading into the 2025 fantasy baseball season. So if you have questions that you are curious to see how they are answered, we're not answering these questions. We're kind of just posing, what do we think about these, and maybe giving our best guesses, and we'll see how it plays out during the year. If you have any questions you are curious to see how they're answered during the season, be sure to drop those in the comments as well. Also, be sure, like I said, drop a comment in there, try and win that John Smoltz jersey. Very cool prize we're giving away as well. For Maher, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thanks everybody for tuning in this week, and we will see you again next week on the FantasyPros MLB YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your podcasts answering those biggest questions. We'll see you then.